We all know that saying, practice what you preach, right? But what does that really mean, especially when we're talking about a faith as diverse and as rich as Islam? How does it view that connection between what you believe and then how you actually live that out? Are there any surprises there? Let's find out.
You know, right from the start, this presentation, it really emphasizes that for Muslims, matching your words with your deeds. It's
Yeah.
about way more than just keeping up appearances. It's about a much deeper thing. It's like striving for this inner alignment between what's in your heart, what you believe, and how you actually act. And that journey, oh man, it's a huge part of spiritual growth.
So it's not just about looking good, it's about an actual interchange. That makes sense. But the
Mhm.
presentation, it doesn't shy away from calling out hypocrisy, does it? There's that powerful verse from the Quran, Surah As-Saf 61.2 through 3, where it says, "O you who have believed, why do you say what you do not do? Great is the hatred in the sight of Allah that you say what you do not do." Wow. When you hear that, it really drives home the point that this is serious business.
It really does. And, for our listeners who may not be familiar with this, sort of, it's like a chapter in the Quran. And the way it's worded here, it's so strong, so direct. It's directly talking to those people who are claiming to have faith, but then their actions just totally don't reflect that belief at all.
Yeah.
And to say that hypocrisy, you know that earns Allah's hatred. That's a powerful statement
Yeah.
about how much this matters.
It definitely makes you stop and think, doesn't it? But the presentation also connects this idea back to the Hadith. Now, for our listeners, the Hadith are those collected sayings and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like it's not just about individual integrity, but it's also about leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, the Hadith, they give us this practical guidance on how to live out these Islamic principles, and many of them focus on this idea of good character and accountability. And it seems that's especially true for people who are in positions of influence. There's one Hadith that says, "The best among you are those who have the best manners and character." So it's not just enough to know the right thing, you got to live it out. Be an example for others.
Okay, so leading by example, it's a big deal. There's another Hadith that really stood out to me in the presentation. It says, "Each of you is a shepherd, and each of you is responsible for his flock." Now, this one really makes you think, doesn't it? Even if you're not a CEO or anything. What do you think? Does this change how we should look at leadership in our everyday life, in our normal lives?
Absolutely. It's such a vivid analogy, isn't it? It highlights the responsibility that we all have. For who? Well, for the people that we influence, whether it's our family, our friends, our colleagues, even just the people we see every day, we interact with. And the presentation, it goes on to give some very specific advice on how to actually live by this principle.
Okay, I'm curious about that. What kind of advice does it give?
Well, one of the key things that it emphasizes is self-reflection. It actually suggests setting aside time each day, or at least regularly, to honestly assess yourself.
Yeah.
Are your actions matching up with your beliefs? You got to create that habit of holding yourself accountable.
So almost like a spiritual audit, huh, of your own behavior.
Exactly. But it also stresses that simply having good intentions, it's not enough. The presentation highlights the importance of constantly seeking knowledge to make sure that you're practicing your faith authentically. You have to understand the why behind the actions, not just blindly follow rules or customs.
That's such an important point, isn't it? It's not just about going through the motions. You have to understand that deeper meaning behind what you're doing. And I guess that ties into the idea of striving for consistency, which the presentation mentions too, right? It's about making a genuine effort day in and day out to align your behavior with your beliefs.
Exactly. And the presentation makes it very clear that this isn't about being perfect. We're all human. We all slip up, right? It's about continuing to strive, keep learning, and keep growing.
Okay, so we've talked about how important it is to align your beliefs with your actions, but how does this actually work out in the real world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the presentation gives some real-life examples. It touches on all sorts of situations, from our personal relationships to how we act in our communities and even in the workplace. What's really interesting is how it emphasizes that in Islam, faith and action, they're not separate things. They're intertwined.
So you can't just have faith in your heart, you have to show it through your actions
Well,
too, right?
Exactly. In Islam, iman, or faith, it's not just an internal feeling. It's something that you need to express and strengthen through what you do. The presentation even makes this really cool analogy. It says that neglecting action while only focusing on belief is like neglecting one wing of a bird. You need both wings working together to actually be able to fly.
Wow, that's a really powerful image. So basically, if you're not living out your faith, it's like your spiritual life is just grounded, But let's be real here. We all make mistakes. We're not perfect. How does the presentation handle that very human reality?
Well, and it actually makes a point of saying that no one's perfect and we're all going to slip up at some point. But what really matters is how we respond to those slip-ups. It emphasizes that instead of getting all discouraged, we should seek forgiveness and use those moments, those mistakes, as opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's not about beating yourself up when you mess up.
No, not at all. It's about acknowledging it, seeking forgiveness and then moving forward. It's about making progress, not about being perfect. And this is where the presentation offers a perspective that I think is really refreshing. It stresses that we shouldn't let our mistakes get us down, but we should actually see them as chances to learn and get stronger in our resolve to live by those values.
That is such an important point, and I think it's something we can all take away from this regardless of what our faith is. It's so easy to get caught up in that idea that we have to be perfect. But the truth is, we're all works in progress, aren't we?
Absolutely. It's all about embracing that process of growth and understanding that it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey. What's really interesting is how this focus on forgiveness and self-improvement, it extends to how we treat other people too.
Oh, I'd love to hear more about that. How does this idea of practicing what you preach affect our relationships with others?
Well, the presentation really highlights how when you make your actions match your words, it builds trust and authenticity in how you interact with people. When they see that you're really trying to live by your values, it creates this foundation of respect and understanding.
It's like you're saying, look, I'm not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk too. And that consistency, it really says something about your character, doesn't it?
Exactly. It shows you're not just saying things to make people like you or to fit in. You're really trying to live out the things that you believe in. And that integrity, it can be so powerful, both for yourself and for the people you're around. It helps create a more positive and trustworthy environment, whether we're talking about your personal relationships, your community, or even your work. But one question that often comes up, especially in a world like ours, where there are so many different values and beliefs, is how to deal with all that.
That's a great point. We live in a world where people come from all sorts of backgrounds and they have so many different views. So how does this presentation address that?
Well, it actually emphasizes that one of the beautiful things about the Islamic framework is that it helps us navigate all that complexity. It encourages respectful dialogue, trying to understand each other and finding common ground while staying true to your own principles.
So it's not about forcing your beliefs on other people. It's about having those real conversations and trying to build bridges, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we might see things differently, but we can still connect with each other and learn from one another.
That's a really valuable thing to remember. But you know what? We've covered so much already, and my brain is starting to feel a little full. I think we need to take a little break and let all this sink in. Don't go anywhere, deep divers. We'll be right back with the last part of our exploration on practicing what you preach in Islam.
It really is fascinating. The presentation acknowledges that, specific practices, they might look different in different cultures. But the Islamic framework, it actually gives us this universal standard for what ethical behavior looks like. It's not about some rigid set of rules. It's about focusing on these core principles, things like authenticity and responsibility, and always working to improve yourself.
So even if interpretations are different between cultures, there's this underlying set of Islamic values that goes beyond those differences.
Exactly. It's like it's saying, hey, we may come from different places, we might have different customs, but at the end of the day, we're all on this journey of trying to be better people. And I think that's something that anyone can connect with, no matter what their background is.
It's about recognizing, like you said, that shared humanity and that desire we all have to grow and to find meaning. But this presentation, it doesn't just talk about these principles, right? It gives some concrete examples of what practicing what you preach might look like in different parts of life.
Oh, absolutely. It dives into specifics. Things like personal relationships, how we're involved in our communities, even how we behave at work. For example, when it comes to relationships, it talks about patience and honesty. It's about really living those values out and how you treat your loved ones, your friends, even those people you might disagree with.
So it's not just about saying the right things. It's about actually being patient and honest when you're interacting with other people. What about community involvement? What does the presentation say about that?
Well, it emphasizes how important it is to be actively engaged in your community, participating in service or charity. It's about taking your faith outside of your home or the mosque and making it real, through actions that benefit others.
So it's about taking that idea of responsibility for your flock like that hadith we were talking about before, and applying it to your whole community.
Exactly. And when it comes to work, the presentation highlights integrity and honesty as super important, especially in your professional life. It's about building a reputation for being trustworthy, for being ethical in how you do business.
It's like saying, look, my faith, it's not something I just turn on and off depending on where I am. It's a part of me, and it influences everything I do.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. And what really stands out to me is how much it emphasizes the connection between faith and action in Islam. The presentation really hammers home the point that faith, it's not just this thing you feel inside. You have to show it, demonstrate it through what you do.
So you can't just believe in your heart. You actually have to live it out too.
Exactly. And it goes both ways. The presentation explains that if you don't act on your beliefs, it can actually make your faith weaker. It compares neglecting action while just focusing on belief to, get this, a bird that's trying to fly with only one wing. You need both to really soar. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's a really vivid image. But let's be real for a second. We're human, right? We make mistakes. We don't always live up to our ideals. How does the presentation deal with that? Because we all mess up sometimes.
It's so true. And the presentation doesn't ignore that. It acknowledges that everyone stumbles, No one's perfect. Mm-hmm. But what really matters is how we deal with those mistakes. Perfect. It emphasizes that instead of getting all down on ourselves, we should ask for forgiveness and see those mistakes as opportunities, as chances to learn and grow.
So it's not about punishing yourself when you mess up.
Not at all. Yeah. It's about owning up to it, asking for forgiveness, and then moving on. It's all about progress, not perfection. And this is where the presentation has this really, I think, refreshing perspective. It stresses that we shouldn't get discouraged by our mistakes. We should see them as chances to learn and to actually strengthen our commitment to those values.
That's such a good point. And it's something we can all apply to our lives, regardless of our faith. It's so easy to get trapped in that idea that we have to be perfect. But in reality, we're all a work in progress, right?
Absolutely. It's about embracing that journey of growing and understanding that it's not just about the end goal, it's about the whole process. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool? This focus on forgiveness and improving ourselves, it actually carries over to how we treat other people.
Oh, that's interesting. How does that work? How does practicing what you preach influence how we treat other people?
Well, the presentation points out that when your actions line up with what you say, it builds trust. It makes your interactions with people more genuine. When people see that you're really trying to live out your values, it creates this foundation of respect and understanding.
It's like saying, I'm not all talk, I'm actually doing it too. That consistency, it really says something about you as a person.
For sure. It shows that you're not just saying things to impress people or to try to fit in. You're really trying to live by those things you believe. And that kind of integrity, it's powerful, man. Yeah. Both for you and for the people around you. It helps create a better atmosphere, one that's more positive and trusting, whether it's in your personal life, in your community, or at work. But, one question that comes up a lot, especially in a world as diverse as ours, is how do you handle all these different values and beliefs that people have?
That's a great point. We've got people from all walks of life, all kinds of different backgrounds and views. So how does this presentation address that?
Well, it actually emphasizes that one of the great things about the Islamic framework is that it gives us tools to deal with that. It encourages us to talk to each other with respect, to try to understand where others are coming from, and to find common ground while staying true to our own principles.
So it's not about forcing your beliefs on others. It's about having meaningful conversations and trying to build bridges, right?
You got it. It's about recognizing that even though we might not see eye to eye on everything, we can still find ways to connect and learn from each other.
That's a really important takeaway. You know what? We've covered so much ground today, and I think we need to give our brains a little break to let all this information settle in. But don't worry, deep divers. We'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive into what it means to practice what you preach in Islam.
All right, deep divers, welcome back. We're in that final stretch of our deep dive into practicing what you preach in Islam. And right before the break, we were talking about how this idea works in a world with so many different values and beliefs.
And one thing that really struck me about this presentation, it's how it shows just how universal this Islamic framework is. It emphasizes these principles of aligning your actions with your beliefs, striving to be authentic, taking responsibility for your choices. And these are things that anyone can relate to, no matter what their background is. So it's not just a set of rules for Muslims. It's like a roadmap for anyone who wants to live a life that has more meaning, a life that's ethical.
That's it. It's about recognizing that we all share this desire to grow, to become better people, and to make the world a little bit more just, a little bit more compassionate. And the presentation actually gives some really practical advice on how to do that.
Okay, so tell me more. What kind of practical advice?
Well, one of the big things it talks about is intention. It says in Islam, it's not just about what you do, it's about why you do it. That inner motivation is really important. Your actions should come from a sincere desire to please Allah and to live your life the way He wants you to.
So it's not enough just to go through the motions. You got to have that real, heartfelt commitment to your faith, huh?
Exactly. And that intention should show up in everything you do, from how you treat your family and friends, to how you act at work and in your community.
That makes me wonder, we've talked so much about action, but what about belief? Where does belief fit in with this whole idea of practicing what you preach?
That is a great question. And you know what? The presentation actually answers that directly. It explains that in Islam, belief and action are like two parts of the same whole. You can't have one without the other. You can't have true faith without action and action without faith. It just doesn't mean anything.
So they work together. Like your actions make your faith stronger, and your faith inspires you to act.
You got it. It's this amazing cycle of growth and development. And the presentation really emphasizes that this journey of practicing what you preach, it's a lifelong thing. It's not like you reach some point of perfection. It's about always striving, always learning, always growing.
So it's okay to make mistakes. It's more about getting back on track and asking forgiveness and just keep going.
That's exactly it. And the presentation reminds us that Allah is so merciful, so forgiving. He understands that we're human and that we're going to mess up. The important thing is that we keep trying, we learn from our mistakes, and we never give up on becoming better versions of ourselves.
There's something so powerful about that, It's not about reaching this impossible ideal. It's about embracing the whole process of growing and trying to make our actions match up with what we believe in, one step at a time, right?
It really is. And it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How would our lives be different? How would the lives of people around us be different if we really focused on living out our values, whatever those values are? Something to think about, huh?
It really is. And on that note, deep divers, that's a wrap on our deep dive into practicing what you preach in Islam. We've learned some really interesting stuff today, and I think we've all come away with some food for thought about what it means to live a life that's authentic and meaningful. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving